Hello and welcome to Procrasaturbation Station. Procrastination as in procrastinating and that other thing that we all do. If you can put it together, then you're my people, and if you can't, perhaps click that next button. No shade. I'm your host, Hannah, and I'm here to talk about self-sabotage in a way that invites all parts of us to come along for the journey. I'm here to lay out the setbacks and superpowers of self-sabotage in order to manage our limitations. Throughout the show, we'll discuss designing a life that works in your favor through sustainable creative practices. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope you enjoyed today's topic. Hello and welcome to Procrasaturbation Station. Today, I'd like to discuss something that makes you feel high and mighty. It swells your head and holds you back from showing up in service to your community. In other words, I'd like to talk about your huge ego. I'm just kidding, I don't actually know how big your ego is, but I find the ego to be a huge topic of conversation among spiritual and energetic healers with a common misconception that needs to be addressed. The ego is something that we all have. It's the voice in our head that tells us when we're great at something or better off without something, or it says that Sarah should really watch her tone when she's talking to me. Today's topic will be guided by the subtopics of the villain era, judgment and observation, opening doors for yourself, and what to do with your ego. My goal with today's topic is to highlight the ego in a way to help us recognize what it is and how to work with it rather than against it, to maximize our potential and to maximize our comfort. I hope you gained some perspective with this topic, and please, as always, if you loved this topic or completely hated it, hit me up on Instagram because I would really love to know your thoughts. And now for the villain era. Why the ego matters and what people say about the ego. Now let's take a throwback to grade 11 English class when most of us learned about Freud. Now I won't get started on Freud himself with his patriarchal beliefs and raging mommy complex, regardless of the fact that all geniuses are inherently insane. One of Freud's concepts includes the id, the ego, and the superego. Your id is your inner child. It's the part of your psyche looking to convince you to eat more cookies and skip your jog. Your superego is your moral compass. It guides you through perceived moral codes and societal rules that you've semi-consciously picked up throughout your life, giving you a generous dose of guilt when you go against the grain. Your ego is the mediator between your id and your superego. Your ego wants to amplify pleasure and minimize pain, in contrast of the two versions of your inner self, the id and inner child, that seeks reward, and the superego, your inner parent, which rules with an iron fist. Your ego presents to you the possibility of maximum comfort by perceiving reality. It says to your id, we can't exactly eat more cookies because we agreed to stop at 2 and we're watching our sugar intake. And it says to your superego, no one is perceiving my actions as closely as I am. I can let loose once in a while and I don't have to be so rigid on this rule at this moment. As I mentioned in my past episode called Meditation for Busy People, your ego plays an important role in the triad of id, ego, superego, and it's impossible to remove one without removing all three. I'm passionate about this concept because I've heard time and time again by healers, if you want to be happy, you must remove your ego. I think the concept they're getting at with this is when you're removed from yourself, you're able to put in work to benefit the societal collective. And by benefiting the collective, you are therefore benefiting yourself. I'd like to offer that you can show up to serve your community while simultaneously serving yourself, and you don't need to construct some fancy and deep story to justify your worthiness of benefiting from life. On a side note, this concept of removing the self in order to serve your community perplexes me. It brings me to the question, is it important to be humble? On one hand, being humble in your relationships and doing nice things for people without drawing attention to it or the expectation of reward is a massively admirable trait in your personal relationships. But being humble in your professional life is an easy way to get yourself on the fast track to nowhere land. If you've ever heard the phrase, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, when you're in business, it's okay to highlight your achievements, all the ways that you go above and beyond for your employer or for your customer. If you find a flaw in the process of your company and find new ways to save and therefore increase on their ROI, you better brag until the cows come home. Otherwise, your company will take that bonus and bypass how they got it. Most business coaches preach for you to know your why in order to tap into your motivation. This can be super beneficial for business owners to develop an internal dedication if they wake up every day without motivation to work towards their goals. You should care very much about why you do what you do, but realistically, when you have a product or service that someone really needs or really, really wants, No one cares what your reasons are. I'm sure Walmart, the CEO, they don't have benevolent reasons. Neither does Bezos. Neither does Zuckerberg. None of these people truly care about connection, about accessibility, about any of these things that make a business owner show up in service for their community. They show up in service for the community because their products are things that people really need. And that doesn't mean that they need some special reason to offer to the community things that they need. Now, let's say you're giving money to a homeless man. He does not care if you're doing it with pure intentions of moving the collective forward. He would be just as happy with the money you gave him if you were a con man who stole all of that money from an unsuspecting, vulnerable old lady. I really hope you didn't. But at the end of the day, the person only cares that they're getting what they need. What happens if you look at your product or service as a hero in the life of someone who really needs it? And what happens if you're not wondering why you do what you do, but you feel like you're floundering in your daily tasks? That's when we talk strategy. I debate the difference between why and how with my good friend Gunawan on one of my new interviews coming out, and I'll give more context on this concept probably next week. Listen, 10 out of 10 times that you get into an argument with someone, your ego is to blame. Your ego is the thing inside you that says, I deserve different than this. Something about this feels wrong. The other person is taking advantage of me. It's a thing in your head that's looking out for you in your relationships. Sometimes relationships play out where the more submissive partner completely removes their ego in service of the more dominant partner. They absorb their belief systems, their actions, and they never speak up about what would serve them best. This is an example of when someone removes their ego to their own detriment, because no one else's ego is right to serve me in my life. If you find yourself getting into a lot of fights in your relationships, I believe both parties' egos are to blame. Someone in the relationship might be thinking, maybe even subconsciously, I don't care if I'm even right, I want to win, and I don't care what I have to say to make that happen. And the argument continues until one or both parties are willing to put their egos to the side and apologize and begin making reparations. I don't think it's possible to walk through life with a partner without disagreeing. We've both come from different upbringings, we have different belief systems, different parents, different genetics. The manner with which you disagree, however, speaks volumes about your ability to regulate your ego. There will always be moments in life where a decision must be made, and my instincts and upbringing are telling me to go one direction, and my partners are telling them to go another way. That's the work of being in a healthy relationship, both of you speaking your truth and both of you compromising to find a third place solution. This is only possible when our egos are fully detached from the idea that the way our instincts are telling us to go is always the right option. However, that shouldn't stop you from voicing your opinions and hopefully benefit at least 50% of the time. Without our ego, we are doormats and punching bags for others to walk all over. Our instincts usually know what's best for us and will tell us to speak up about anything that doesn't align with our highest potential. And it's your job to listen and to reflect on the messages that you're given from your own body. And now to move on to judgment and observation. If you made it this far in today's episode and you're still not completely sure what your ego sounds like to you, it might sound like the voice of judgment disguised as a rational logic. You may think something to yourself like, why is that person always just a little bit messy when they come to work? The primitive root of that statement is I would never show up somewhere presenting the same way as that other person. But it appears like judgment and comes out as the other person is at fault for your discomfort for showing up how they are. The reality is, perhaps what they have is working for them. Perhaps they have 100 children and 19 grandmas, or they spend more time focusing on being competent than being tidy. Don't judge yourself for having thoughts like these when you see people. We all have them, but it's important to reflect for a moment to understand why you feel it's not okay to show up as you are if it means getting your job done effectively. These thoughts and feelings of judging others can stem from a place of self-judgment. It can stem from a time when you showed up to a public place looking messy and you perceived judgment from others that reinforced that to you as a no-no. But I'll tell you, I'm successful, charismatic, and I can charm open any door I set my eyes on. And I never brush my hair, and I rarely wear makeup, and I open just as many doors for myself when I do decide to doll up once in a while than when I don't. To me, this isn't a flex, but some people would be floored at my courage to go out in public, unkept hair, acne breakouts and all, and do my groove thing regardless. I'm not saying there aren't days when I don't feel so hunky-dory about myself or my flaws, but there's a positive leaning neutrality. I try not to love my body too much, because my body will always be changing. And I try not to hate my body, because my body is the vessel that takes me through this beautiful life. I've learned not to care what other people think about what I do or who I am, and it's been paired with an equal and opposite reaction to also no longer care what other people are up to. There's so much power in staying in your lane because when you do, you can pad your lane to be as smooth a ride as possible. You can't do that when your eyes are constantly on someone else's track. The intersection of judgment is observation. We are humans, which means we are inherently judgmental. I have judgmental thoughts. Shocking, I know, and I know for certain that you do as well. The key is to understand tact around keeping your judgments to yourself and knowing the time and place for when sharing is appropriate. Having judgmental feelings does not make you a bad person. The difference between making a judgment and making an observation relies on whose lane your eyes are on. When you're focusing on someone else's lane, you'll pass judgment to perceive what they're doing as a fumble, assuming by acknowledging their mistakes that you can avoid them in your own lane. When your eyes are on your own lane and you perceive anyone else who crosses paths with you, you may pass judgments too that maybe you don't share, but you continue to observe the feelings that arise within you when you see the way that someone else is presenting themselves and you think, what about you do I want for me? What about your path would make mine more comfortable? This can mean giving people permission to have freedom to do, wear, eat, behave, and love exactly how they want to learn through whatever process works best for them while simultaneously observing to make your own process easier by getting inspired by others and evolving your expression over time. And if your ego is sitting here screaming, because I'm an individual, I'm unique, and no one can copy me, you're right, because same. This is true and also used to keep me hidden from the world. These are threatening feelings of vulnerability and the consequential repercussions of someone finding solace in the same model of expression as me. I used to be threatened to the point of paralysis that if I share my true self, someone may see something they don't like and judge me, or they'd see something they like too much and steal it and try to replace me to the point where I become redundant. This ties back to problems with abandonment and mindset. To address the abandonment, I've agreed with myself that I will never, ever abandon what calls from within me. I will always honor my inner child, and I will parent myself with tenderness. I will seek balance in all things, structure and freedom, learning and application, networking and bonding, nurturing and cutting ties, following the rules and creating my own. The frame of mind I like to have around these threatening feelings now is when I'm fully being and honoring myself, I have the opportunity to inspire others. And once inspired, they may recreate what I've done. But ultimately, they will never be able to exactly replicate the original because the original is ever evolving. I'm a mosaic of the phases of life I've undergone and the people I've met who've inspired transition in my expression. You can copy my words, but you will never copy my expression. This goes for any art form. The fear of becoming redundant is ever strong with artists. In my expression of art, it's meant to evolve. From the stage of allowing yourself to be a beginner to reworking, repeating, and remastering your mistakes. I'm not sure if we're ever really an expert in things for this exact reason, for the evolution, but rather we find new ways to make new mistakes, and we can share our findings from past mistakes along the way with the people who cross paths with us. We can be so great at things, but nobody knows everything. My id wants to know it all. I love learning, and my id tells me to do all of that earning. And my superego says once you know all of the things that you need to know, you will then be worthy. But the reality is, you can be a specialist or a generalist. I've taken a specialty in business marketing, but my personality is more the type of a generalist. I have a very broad selection of information, very specific tidbits and facts about random topics. We could talk for hours about ghosts, witches, and the occult, healing, space, science, the ocean, entrepreneurship, human behavior, herbalism. I could give you at least 3 facts about any living creature the Nature Channel has graced me with, to name a couple of the many hyperfocuses I've had over the years. The reality is, I can know so much, but I will never know everything, and I believe everyone is here with a lesson to share and a lesson to learn. Everyone I meet either affirms or challenges my ego on the direction I'm taking with my learning. And now for opening doors and walking through them. What to do with your ego? What do you do with your ego when you are presented with an equally strong and opposite belief system? Your ego might be holding you back in some aspects of your relationships. It could be fueling other aspects. It adds fuel to your relationships when you use it to observe problems and detect solutions to quiet the storm before it happens. Ego is the mechanism behind how you show up in your relationships. By reading other people's nonverbal cues to find the exact moments to reassure them or when to offer solutions compared to lending an ear. Sometimes someone vents to you and you think to yourself, I've been here before and I know exactly how to fix this. And other times they're venting to you and you say to yourself instead, they're in the emotional phase of this problem, not the solution generation phase. So instead of offering to fix it, today I'll just listen. This could be described as your moral compass or your superego, or your ego that stands between the version of yourself that would make the problem about you and the version of you that tries to fix it. The version of yourself that mainly just listens and speaks up according to the patterns in the circumstance you're observing. Sometimes your ego tells you, this person deserves my warmth, and other times it tells you that whoever you're speaking to doesn't deserve your warmth. Something subtle in you says, I need to chameleon myself in this moment from this person, and other times it tells you to hold your freak flag high with pride and to bear your truest self. There's trouble when the ego starts to overcorrect towards one of our two inner selves, the one that wants to make everything about them, and the one that rules with a strict code of conduct. Let's say the code of conduct you have a belief system around is makeup. I'll wear makeup on a date or in an interview or when I feel like it. I like it because it's fun, it's a full art form, but when I wear it too much, I break out like crazy, so I'd rather save my skin from the chemicals. That's my personal preference. Some people operate under the conduct of daily makeup. Mad respect, it's literally art, and I hope if you do wear makeup daily, that it's an enjoyable experience for you. But what happens when your wires get crossed and you can't do simple things like go to the grocery store without makeup? First of all, I hope the reason you're doing it is not for men. I have never met a man who has seen a boob and thought, but her eyelashes aren't long enough. Or whatever the trendy look is at the time. Secondly, if it's for other women, above the age of high school, most women are nice to me when I'm nice to them. If it's because you have a flaw or insecurity that makes it difficult to feel comfortable in your bare skin, I hope you come to realize that your lovely smile and the twinkle in your eye is always the best makeup. If you feel makeup has become a mechanism that prevents you from loving yourself fully without it, it can be really debilitating and it can stop you from living your life to your full potential. There's no shame in seeking professional help for self-confidence. We all know that we don't wear makeup or doll ourselves up for anyone but ourselves, right? Right? It's definitely not the attention we get or the lack of attention towards our insecurities that gives us confidence or anything. And honestly, what do I know? There's a million reasons to do anything. I just hope it's known that it's an option to post that fresh face selfie without feeling like you did something brave, because that's your freaking face and I love to see it. There's no rule saying that you have to wear makeup. You're also allowed to conceal and enhance, and there's no rule saying that you can't wear makeup. Random tangent about makeup aside, can we hold up for a second and reflect on how that relates to the topics at hand? Id, ego, superego, judgment, and observation. For example, what if there are two women? One religiously wears makeup, and she consistently shames the other for valuing the time they free up without wearing it. They'll say things to each other like, imagine how many more doors you'll open if you dedicated the time to practice doing your makeup. And the other would say, but imagine not doing that and sleeping in. Their conversations might be a tit for tat on why their moral code of conduct is superior to the other. What if this example applied to the whole world at large? Where everyone has hyper-individualistic identities, if everyone is a museum filled with tapestries where every stitch builds their identity, and to get to know them is to walk through their hallways and understand why their presentation is the way it is, and how you can cushion your own path to live a softer life. To take every polarizing belief system we have as humans, be it spirituality and religion, human and animal rights, whatever it is, we take our stance on each issue and we find the lesson we can carry through life with us. I want to learn as many lessons as I can throughout life. I want to remain neutral while I inform myself to find my stance on things. I want to evolve my stance on things as I'm presented with new information, and I also want to pass my lessons on to whoever is willing to listen. Hello, fourth wall. If you're listening to this, I hope you know you're allowed to have an ego that tells you when you deserve different, that you're allowed to have an inner child that impulsively wants to build and destroy, and an inner parent that wants you to present like they have their shit together among all of the chaos. You're allowed to have a full spectrum of emotions and to draw on your experiences, and I hope you allow yourself the grace of a blank slate in new circumstances in order to broaden your horizons. I know it's a pipe dream to think we could all get along. Like two people who bring what they learned throughout life to the table to inform the direction of their path, but to not allow that to prevent them from redirecting in the face of an alternative perspective. That even if your ego is challenged, you can recognize we all have an ego, and both speaking up and staying quiet can contribute to peace for collective benefit. Your ego, the inner persona in charge of mediation between extremes, who prioritizes comfort, can inform your self-confidence and charisma. I watched an Instagram reel that described charisma as a learned trait and compared it to the intersection of warmth and competency. When you are aware of your ego, you recognize how you want the situation to be, you can then channel that energy to create comfort for everyone involved. When someone presents you with a problem, you can anticipate how you'd want someone to react if you were in their shoes and respond accordingly. If you spot a problem with someone, you can propose, if we made this adjustment, I'd be more comfortable, and most of the time, people who care about you want to show up in service to maximize your comfort and hopefully share with you in that additional comfort. Your competency allows you to check your ego to see if you actually have the answers to solve the problem at hand. Like, for example, your girlfriend has raging mommy issues and you've convinced yourself you hold the key to fix all of their problems. Mood. If you don't check your ego, you could find yourself in a situation where you're stuck between a mama bear and a loyal cub who's unwilling to admit that they haven't fallen very far from the proverbial bear tree. Your ego can tell you when you actually have the answers to a problem and when you're lacking some key information. Charisma is knowing when and what to speak to. Your ego can open doors for you. Your psyche identifies, that's a good opportunity for me to pursue, and your charisma anticipates and delivers what's required of you to get there. Now, to move us on to the conclusion, thank you so much for being with me for today's episode. We've discussed the ego in all of its forms, from the inner child to the inner parent, pivoting your judgments to be more like observations, and how to not let your ego get the best of you when it comes to interacting with others. As always, I am not an expert in the ego by any means, and this episode has been a culmination of my personal beliefs, opinions, and obviously some research. Feel free to disagree, but I do ask that if you do disagree, come and tell me about it. Tell me about what it is that you disagreed with and what you believe instead on Instagram. That's the key part. You have to tell me what you believed instead, because if you just disagree and you don't tell me why, then I'm going to think that you disagreed because you didn't fully understand or listen, or maybe I didn't construct my script right, or whatever it might be. I'm gonna think it was me, bro. You gotta tell me what it is that you disagreed with and give me an alternate perspective. I hope with this episode that you find power in trusting your observations and staying in your own lane. I hope that you allow yourself to luxuriate in comfort when it serves you, and that you show up to serve someone else when it would be a service to them. I hope that you find power in owning your flaws, your mistakes, and if your ego can get a little mean sometimes, that you find some way to release the grip your inner parent has on you. I hope that you play and ignore your ego that judges you for the audacity to look silly. I hope you find freedom from feeling like your identity needs to be defined by the containers you've been in throughout life, and that you have peace of mind with the manner with which you show up in new containers life asks you to fill. I hope when life asks you to challenge your ego, your anchored beliefs, your core identity, that you take it with neutrality until you have perceived enough information to make adjustments that serve you in the long run, and to avoid setting unrealistic expectations for yourself to know everything, be everyone, and to do the most in life. I hope you build experiences that cushion your path, that journeys you through to reflect on a soft life. I hope that whatever forces at bay might come to the realization that every one of us is a museum with hallways lined with art that tells the story of our lives, to create more spaces where more people can experience the freedom to express what inspires them. Our world would be just a little bit brighter. I hope from this episode you also come to the realization that your ego is important and ego death can actually be counterproductive to living a fulfilling life, and that you can show up to service others for the sake of gratification without foregoing all personal benefit from taking the hand that extends to you. With all of this said, I humbly thank you for being here with me, and I'll catch you next time. Cheers for now. Thank you so much for being here with me, and if you enjoyed today's topic, now is a great moment to subscribe. If you have any feedback about today's topic, please reach out to my social channels. I help creative entrepreneurs market their creations in a way that feels authentic. I have a self-study marketing program that covers basic and advanced marketing concepts with 9 modules and activity sheets. I also sell content creation templates to help you manage your social media with unlimited content creation ideas. And I also offer one-on-one marketing consulting services. Check out my socials and my website to learn more. If you're interested in working with me, please reach out via email. So that's social media if you're reaching out for my podcast, and email if you're reaching out for business. All relevant contact links are in the description, and thanks again for listening. Cheers for now. That was pretty good.